Welcome to Hannity tonight. It is a jam-packed edition that we have for you. In just a few minutes, I'll be joined live by Hillary Shelton. He is the NAACP's Washington Bureau Director for an exclusive interview. I'll get his take on the George Zimmerman verdict and much more. But first, while there is no question that Sanford, Florida has served as the epicenter of controversy surrounding the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, the fallout from this tragedy has reached each and every corner of America. And that includes Washington, D.C., now particularly following Saturday's acquittal of George Zimmerman. On Monday, Illinois Democrat Luis Gutierrez called on the House Judiciary Committee to hold hearings on the case. He released a statement that read in part, quote, "When any child is gunned down and no one goes to jail, it is incumbent on lawmakers at the highest level of government to investigate whether justice has been done." Also this week, the Attorney General of the United States said yet again that his department is investigating whether civil rights charges should be filed against Zimmerman. But beyond hearings and investigations, a number of Democratic lawmakers are also calling for new legislation to be passed that they say would prevent future shooting deaths. However, at least one House Republican is accusing some on the left of politicizing tragedy for political gain. And he says it all starts way at the top. Here's Iowa Congressman Steve King.
My sympathy goes out also to the Martin family and the Zimmerman family for this ordeal that they've been through. But the evidence didn't support prosecution, and the Justice Department engaged in this, the president engaged in this, and turned it into a political issue that should have been handled exclusively with the law and order.
Now, of course, the shooting death of Trayvon Martin was an issue lawmakers in Washington have talked about from the moment the tragedy happened. For example, remember this.
Racial profiling has to stop, Mr. Speaker. Just because someone wears a hoodie does not make them a hoodlum. The Bible teaches us, Mr. Speaker, in the book of Micah 6:6-8,
the member will suspend.
These words,
the member will
these words, he has shown you, O man,
the member will
what is
suspend.
good.
And joining me now are the two lawmakers you just heard from, Republican Congressman Steve King and Democratic Congressman Bobby Rush. Gentlemen, welcome to Hannity.
Thanks for having us on, Sean.
Congressman Rush, let me start with you. You said in that piece here, racial profiling has to stop. Just because someone wears a hoodie doesn't make them a hoodlum. Do you have any evidence in the Zimmerman case that proves that or suggests that?
Well, yeah. Trayvon Martin was not a criminal, had not been charged at all, but yet and still today we can all agree that he is a young dead black boy, teenager, who was killed by a guy who was not a law enforcement officer, did not attempt to arrest him at all, but Trayvon is laying in his grave now.
Well,
he was not a hoodlum. There's no indication, not even any accusations that he's a hoodlum. He was an innocent young man leaving a convenience store with a hoodie on and with a snack and a soft drink in his hand, and he's dead.
Mr. Congressman Rush, he broke George Zimmerman's nose, and he was viewed by an eyewitness ground and pounding this guy's head into the cement. I mean, you're saying, now, I would agree, I think there's a misunderstanding, but I asked you if you have any evidence that this was about racial profiling, and you didn't give me any evidence about that. Do you have any evidence on that case?
No, there is certainly evidence that I would consider had I been on the jury.
What is it?
All right, and that evidence is that racial profiling exists in this nation, that there are literally thousands of cases of racial profiling.
Do you have any evidence in this case, though? Any evidence in this case?
In this case, if I had been on the jury, or I think that if any other reasonable person had been on the jury, then that certainly would have been some of the experiences that I would have utilized in terms of my decision.
Well, let me go to Congressman Steve King. Congressman, there was no evidence of racial profiling. As a matter of fact, the FBI looked into it for 16 months. Even the attorney for Trayvon Martin said, and the family said, this case was not about race. So what do you make of congressional action on this?
Well, I think there's been a lot that's been ginned up here that's been focused on race, and they held a faux hearing that focused on race back about a year ago, I would guess, trying to gin up prosecution on this. I'd point out that I know of no federal law against profiling. It needs to be a component of good police work, but and the argument has been constantly to try to find a little thread of whatever George Zimmerman might have said or thought in his life that could be used against him in this prosecution. We can't be punishing what goes on in somebody's head. We can punish the overt act. We can't punish the thought. And so here in Congress, we shouldn't be addressing this. This should be local law enforcement, local decisions made.
Steve, that is one of the problems. You cannot. All right, racial profiling is something that will not, the evidence has to be a different kind of evidence.
Okay,
if you're going to
but Bobby, if you're suggesting then under the profiling.
The mindset of this young of Zimmerman was clearly established when he was told by the police, who do have some authority, to stand down. But he refused to stand down.
Mr. Rush, Congressman, I got to stop you there. We got to be accurate. We're giving out the facts of the case. The operator said, "Where is he now?" And then I interviewed George Zimmerman. He said as soon as the guy said, "We don't need you to follow him," he was going back to the car. And then he had a broken nose, and then an eyewitness that showed Trayvon beating him. You keep kind of glossing over that fact. Why? Why do you gloss over that?
Well, the fact is, I'm not glossing over any fact here. The fact is that Trayvon Martin is dead. All right. Trayvon Martin was accosted by George Zimmerman.
There's no evidence to that, sir. There's no evidence, Mr. Congressman. There's no evidence.
Trayvon Martin there is evidence that he's dead. There is evidence that George Zimmerman had a gun on him. There is evidence that George Zimmerman did, in fact, confront him. Okay.
What's the evidence that he confronted him?
Other than that, because there had to be some interaction. All right. Trayvon Martin didn't have George Zimmerman on his mind.
But there's evidence.
George Zimmerman had Trayvon Martin on his mind.
With all due respect.
George Zimmerman had Trayvon Martin on his mind.
Congressman, with all due respect, an eyewitness in this case placed Trayvon Martin beating the daylights out of Zimmerman, and we hear these pleas, these cries, these screams for help.
That is conjecture on your part.
Not conjecture, it's an eyewitness.
Look, let me say this. If Trayvon Martin was strong enough to pound the man, all right, then George Zimmerman would have, the bruises, the cuts, the scratches on his head would have been much more severe.
I'm ready anytime, Sean.
Congressman King.
Yes. Well, what I think about this is that the facts that we saw, and I think you and I saw the same facts, Sean, and you've dug into this more deeply than anybody else in the media. But as I watched this move towards a decision by the jury, and I contemplated the thought of a conviction of George Zimmerman, and if you take the facts presented in the case, they were in an altercation, and from what I see, it appears that Trayvon Martin did assault George Zimmerman. That's the best thing we've got for testimony, because really, in the end, nobody saw that initial action. And if someone has you down on the ground and they're threatening to kill you and say that they're going to end your life, and you pull a gun out of your holster and you shoot to defend your life, you make a decision. If George Zimmerman had been convicted, then you'd have to wonder if you defend yourself, if you're going to go to prison for life. Right, that's the decision that I think the jury had before them.
Sean, no one knows what happened prior to them being on the ground. Nobody knows that. And so don't just assume that because you have a witness that said that after they were on the ground, they looked out their window and they saw Trayvon, young 17-year-old man, probably got the best of it. But that
But he had a broken nose, so we know how he got on the ground.
Well, we don't know how the nose was broken. No, we don't know how.
You don't know how the nose was broken?
No one has testified yet how his nose was broken.
You think he broke it himself?
Well, he could have broken it when he first surrounded Trayvon and grabbed Trayvon. He could have hit Trayvon Trayvon's shoulder and broke anything.
You think he hit his shoulder, and that's how he broke his nose?
He could have broke his nose on the sidewalk.
He fell down and broke
anywhere.
his nose.
He might have broke his nose even before he met Trayvon.
Even before he met Trayvon.
Nobody
Sean,
knows how he broke
the jury
it.
has rejected all of these arguments that Mr. Rush is giving right now. They rejected them all. And where this discussion now needs to go is George Zimmerman going to be subjected to double jeopardy by the Justice Department that is appearing to continue to politicize this case? They sent people from the Justice Department down to Florida to gin up demonstrations to try to bring about a prosecution of George Zimmerman. We should not politicize the law and justice system in this country. It needs to be objective and it needs to be detached. And he should not be subjected to double jeopardy because of a political movement on the part of the Justice Department.
Leave it here.
Let me just say this. If Trayvon Martin had been a young white teenager, and George Zimmerman had been a black man, George Zimmerman would be in jail today.
Let me ask you a question. Does it matter to you, Congressman Rush?
No doubt about it.
Does it matter to you
No doubt about it.
Does it matter to you, Congressman Rush, that there's a mountain of evidence that shows that George Zimmerman, he tutored minority children, black children for free in his spare time. He took a black woman to his prom. He stood up for a black homeless man against the Sanford police. In other words, there's no evidence of any racial animosity in this man's heart. Why do you ignore that?
There is because this man, it came out of his mouth.
What came out of his mouth?
He stereotyped, and this is what.
What did he say?
This is racial stereotyping is all about. He stereotyped Trayvon Martin.
What did he say?
Because Trayvon Martin was a young black man with a hood on, and all of a sudden, he stereotyped and said, this guy, they always get away. That's what he said. They always get away.
Let me close with this, Sean. If I could just get this piece in.
Real quick.
What happened was a young Hispanic man shot a black man in self-defense, was tried by a jury of women, and somehow Bobby Rush thinks it's a white man's fault.
All right, we got to go. Gentlemen, we are out of time. I have to go. But, gentlemen, thank you both.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, coming up next, I'll speak live with the NAACP's Washington Bureau Director. I'll get his reaction to the tension that is escalating across America.